Hello everyone and welcome back to Superhero Month. Superhero stories are infamous for producing some of the strangest, goofiest things you could possibly imagine. Some superhero stories are great and inspiring, and others are just god-awful. And today I'm going to be covering my personal top 10 list of the worst superhero film and TV ideas. Number 10. Batman, the Brave and the Bold. This one is pretty low on the list because in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of harmless. It's a different sort of take on Batman that has him teaming up a lot with other superheroes. Most often Blue Beetle and Aquaman. Interesting choices. And it returns to a lot of the camp value in the appearance of the Adam West show. It's a cartoon that's aimed specifically at kids. The show is pretty badly written and horribly put together, but I don't really think it's going to leave much of a lasting, painful impression. But I put it on the list because frankly, it's insulting to the collective intelligence of today's children. When I was a kid, we had Batman the Animated Series. That was a show that took us seriously. It challenged our notions of right and wrong and was probably the first TV show I ever watched as a kid that made me think critically. Batman the Brave and the Bold doesn't take its audience seriously at all. It has no depth, no complexity, and not a single challenging notion from start to finish. For that, I really resent it, and it goes on my list. Number 9. Stripperella. Hey, speaking of insulting our intelligence, here's Stan Lee's Stripperella. This was a very short-lived and very stupid cartoon that centered around a woman who was a stripper that fought crime. Yeah, it's just about as stupid as it sounds. The whole thing was nothing but shameless exploitation and awful one-liners. The characters were uninteresting at best and painful to watch at worst. Besides that, the art style was just bland and boring. The animation was nothing special and it all came together to form this festeringly pathetic pile of nothing. It's the kind of show that makes you feel stupider and stupider the more you watch it, which is why it earns my number 9 spot. Number 8. Snarf from Thundercats. I never was much of a Thundercats fan myself, but I do think it could be considered a sort of alternative superhero story. From what I've seen, the show was a little bland, but had fairly decent action and was usually fairly entertaining. So why wasn't I a fan, you may ask? Well, it was because of Snarf. Snarf had the most grating, annoying, whiniest voice I've ever heard in my life. I know what's going on, Snarf, Snarf. Every time he walked on screen, I just wanted to kick him in the head. Because of Snarf, I was never able to enjoy the show and thus never got into it. I just couldn't get past how annoying that little ball of fur was. Because of that, Snarf is a perfect choice for this list. Number 7. The Black Cars from Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Transformers is another one of those entities that can really only be considered superheroes by technicality. But hey, they were noble, they defended the innocent, and they wanted to save the world, which makes them superheroes in my book. A lot of us have seen Michael Bay's Transformers movies, and besides the action, there really isn't anything enjoyable about those movies. But that's pretty much par for the course with Michael Bay, so you know what you're getting when you're going into one of his movies. But nobody, no mind on the planet could have seen these jackasses coming. The second movie introduced these two horribly racially insensitive twin cars that insisted on inserting themselves into the plot whenever they could. These two were like the Jar Jar Binks of Transformers. Everyone I know despised these characters. And in my mind, they're the worst thing that Michael Bay has ever come up with in his entire life. The only thing that's fun about these movies is the action, but you can't even enjoy the action when these two idiots are stumbling around making insufferable one-liners the whole time. The one thing that Michael Bay does better than almost any director I know is extreme over-the-top action scenes, so you have to be pretty effing annoying to destroy those scenes. And these two characters certainly did a bang-up job of ruining things. As such, they are very deserving of my number 7 slot. Number 6. Deadpool from X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now overall, I really didn't hate this movie as much as a lot of other people did. I would never call it a good movie, but I wouldn't call it completely terrible. But the one aspect that all comic book fans detested was the absolute destruction of the character of Deadpool. Lest I get too worked up over this again, I'm just going to say that this is the most I have ever seen a superhero movie miss the mark in terms of a character. They gave him all the wrong powers, all the wrong visuals, all the wrong development, just all the wrong everything. If you want to know what I'm talking about, go read some Deadpool comics. I promise you won't be disappointed. And after seeing this movie, I certainly know what disappointment is all about. Number 5, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. This movie is just awful in every way. At this point, the Superman franchise was on its hands and knees begging to die. And this movie is nothing but a tiny, labored squirt of activity before the franchise finally breathed its last breath. The story was a joke, the science made no sense, the plot holes were gigantic, and the message was confused and idiotic. This film had to try really hard to beat Superman 3 in the crappiness department, but by God, they did it. Making us wish we all had some kryptonite handy, this movie is certainly deserving of a spot on my list. Number 4. Batman and Robin. Probably the most famous bad superhero movie of all time, Batman and Robin was absolutely remarkable in its awfulness. Whereas the previous 3 Batman films all kept trying to push the envelope of what it meant to make a superhero movie, Batman and Robin felt that the best thing to do was stop moving forward and return to the campy, over-the-top tone of the Adam West Batman series. This resulted in a movie that many declared to be the death of the comic book movie. But as bad as my number 4 selection of Batman and Robin is, it is nothing compared to the number 3 selection. Number 3, Steel. It is pretty hard to top the awfulness of the Batman and Robin movie, but there have been a few select superhero movies that have done it. And one of those movies was Steel, a film starring a lesser-known DC superhero played by the Grand Master of Cinematic Blandness, Mr. Shaquille O'Neal. This movie was chock full of painfully bad acting, a plot that made absolutely no sense, insufferable attempts at humor, and some genuinely uninspired action scenes. The special effects were just goofy, and Shaq is about the least effective superhero I have ever seen. He's just a great big brick that gets shot at a lot, and he does almost nothing useful over the course of the entire movie. I will admit that the sheer stupidity of it can be sometimes amusing, but that's not nearly enough to save it. And for that, it ranks pretty high on the number 3 slot. Number 2, the 1990 Captain America movie. Now, a lot of you might not even know what I'm talking about with this film. Well, once upon a time, there was a Captain America movie that was set for release in the summer of 1990, which was also the 50th anniversary of Captain America himself. The film was never actually released in theaters, going instead direct-to-video release. The problem that I have with this film is just how friggin' lame it makes Captain America look. Captain America at his best is a commanding, confident, stalwart citizen bravely defending those in trouble. But in this movie, he's just a weak, bumbling idiot who has absolutely no business putting on a costume and fighting crime. On top of that, the movie's plot is just a pathetic, amorphous pile of nothingness. Not at all helped by some of the most bland and uninteresting action scenes I've ever seen in my life. For all these faults, the 1990 Captain America movie earns its place in the number 2 slot. And the number 1 worst film and TV superhero idea was the original Fantastic Four movie. In the year 1994, long before the 2005 Fantastic Four film, there was an extremely low-budget Fantastic Four movie that was produced, shot, and completed. This movie was never released and is one of the titans of bad superhero movies everywhere. This movie was not made out of any sort of artistic inspiration. It was made simply because Constantine Films did not want to lose the rights to produce the movie. The studio was unable to get the $40 million budget that they had in mind for this movie, and thus they had to trim it down to a mere $1.98 million. The movie was never even intended for release, and thank God for that. From what research I've done on the movie, I can say that the special effects are nothing short of atrocious. And the plot is a steaming, awful lump of moldy excrement. This movie is the stuff of Mystery Science Theater 3000, not any sort of legitimate filmmaking. And another fun fact for you, the production company, Constantine Films, is also responsible for the 2005 and 2007 Fantastic Four films. Yeah, thank God they didn't lose the rights to make the movie. That would have been disastrous. Low on budget, low on appeal, and low on effort, the 1994 Fantastic Four movie is truly the worst superhero movie idea of all time. I'll see you all next time on Superhero Month.